How is it possible that a group chat of all things has dominated the headlines and news cycle for the last 24 hours? Oh, I don't know. Maybe when you have several top national security officials and the vice president who are apparently communicating about a military strike against Houthi rebels in Yemen, and the editor of The Atlantic is mistakenly added to that chat? That's how. This is arguably the biggest controversy of President Donald Trump's second term so far. It has generated a whole heck of a lot of spin on all sides. Will this story go away? Does it have legs? Are there potential legal ramifications to all this? I mean, apparently this reporter just released the text thread. There is a whole lot to discuss, and we're going to get into it right now. I'm Jesse Weber. You're in the Spin Room. Blockbuster story Monday afternoon in The Atlantic. Editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg revealing he had been included in a group chat on the messaging app Signal by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. And Goldberg reporting that Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and others discussed extremely sensitive war plans. We're talking technical details on weapon systems, intended targets in the attack, even the name of an active CIA intelligence officer whose identity Goldberg concealed just to keep their cover. That's the allegation. It is a wild story, and immediately the Trump administration found itself in an unfamiliar position, on the defensive. But really, honestly, you wouldn't know it from listening to Pete Hegseth, who instead of coming out and saying, hey, our bad, this should never have happened, shouldn't have been using this commercial messaging app. No. Instead, he immediately went on the attack against Goldberg.
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist.
That's what it is.
Made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again.
Is this a hoax? Is this a hoax?
The hoaxes of Russia.
What does that have to do with anything?
On both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage. This is what he does.
Doesn't he have the receipts, though? Isn't that the problem?
Why were those details shared on Signal, and how did you learn that a journalist was privy to the targets, the types of weapons used?
I've heard I was characterized. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Really? Keep that in mind for later. No war plans, really? Here's the thing. For Hegseth, setting the tone right away for the Trump administration's response, attacking the journalist as highly discredited, even though they essentially confirmed the authenticity of what he reported, didn't deny that this happened, and kind of downplaying the nature of what was talked about on that group chat. But here's the thing, Goldberg, he is not taking the attacks lying down, going on CNN Monday night right after Hegseth made that comment and making a very different claim.
No, that's a lie. He was texting war plans.
That's a big statement for a journalist to say that's a lie. I mean, you have to imagine they have the goods to back that up. Seems like he does.
Targets were going to be targeted, how they were going to be targeted, who was at the targets, when the next sequence of attacks were happening. I didn't publish this, and I continue not to publish it because it felt like it was too confidential, too technical, and I worry, honestly, that sharing that kind of information in public could endanger American military personnel. But no, they were plans for the attack. They were texted before the attack.
That might have changed a little bit. We'll talk about it. But look, Goldberg standing up to Hegseth in the White House there, calling their claims that he overhyped the reporting a flat-out lie. And that didn't change the White House's posture at all. No, you got Mike Waltz, the guy who was potentially responsible for inviting Goldberg into this chat. Here he is on Tuesday, doubling down on what Hegseth said Monday.
There's a lot of journalists in this city who have made big names for themselves, making up lies about this president, whether it's the Russia hoax or making up lies about Gold Star families. And this one in particular, I've never met, don't know, never communicated with, and we are looking into and reviewing how the heck he got into this room. But I'll tell you what, the world owes President Trump a favor.
The world needs to know from you how that might have happened if you really did do this. And again, no one has said that this was intentional. It looks like it was a mistake, but my gosh. Even you got President Donald Trump himself went after Goldberg and The Atlantic as well, instead of really focusing on the issue of the problem here, this security breach.
That's an app that a lot of people use, and somebody got on. I mean, it happened to...
Well, it's an app that a lot of people use, not necessarily for talking about potential military strikes.
It happened to know the guy's a total sleazebag. The Atlantic is a fail.
See, the Biden administration, I think, came out and said that they used it, but for like scheduling, things like that.
It's a failed magazine. Does very, very poorly. Nobody gives a damn about it. This gives it a little bit of a shot. And I will tell you this, that they've made up more stories, and they're just a failing magazine. The public understands that.
Yeah, but the allegation is you're the one who amplified them by adding him to the group chat, right? I don't think there's an allegation right now that he hacked his way into there. So he's doing his job. He's reporting about it. Now, look, this turned out to be a very big deal because the journalist had a lot more cards to play. Jeffrey Goldberg, in his original article, wrote that he redacted a whole lot of the specifics because he was concerned about national security implications. But after the Trump administration dismissed the information as not really a big deal, downplayed it, Goldberg changed his mind early Wednesday, released most of those messages in a podcast interview with The Bulwark on Tuesday. He talked about the possibility of releasing these messages.
My colleagues and I, and the advice that and the people who are giving us advice on this have some interesting conversations to have about this.
Yeah.
But just because they're irresponsible with material doesn't mean that I'm going to be irresponsible with this material.
Now, my take is it seems like he didn't want to publish this, but maybe it's because he felt the White House forced his hand with denials like this from Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard during a Senate hearing Tuesday where she clashed with Virginia Democrat Mark Warner. Maybe this was the tipping point.
There was no classified material that was shared in that.
So then if there's no classified material, share it with the committee. You can't have it both ways. These are important jobs. This is our national security. Bobbing and weaving and trying to, filibuster your answer.
There it is. That's the problem. That's the corner that they apparently painted themselves into here, right? If you say the information you're talking about is not classified, or maybe it's not such a big deal, you're basically giving permission to Jeffrey Goldberg to publish it, right? Which, by the way, he did. Rhode Island Democrat Jack Reed put CIA Director John Ratcliffe in the same trap later on in the hearing.
If you are not aware of any classified information on the discussions back and forth, would it be appropriate for the author to release the entire text of what he heard?
That's a good question.
I think the author has released, my understanding, essentially almost all of the information as it's been related to me. I don't know what calculation the author made with regard to what information would be released or not.
Well,
I can again confirm that with respect to the communications that were related, as to me, there was no classified information.
As to me. Now look, that is the director of the CIA saying under oath that Jeffrey Goldberg has released almost all of the information from the group chat, maybe. But that's a heavy claim. And on Wednesday morning, Goldberg disproved it because we can now see these messages and they are very detailed. Hegseth at one point laying out a precise timeline for the operation. 1410, so this is military time. More F-18s launch, second strike package. 1415, strike drones on target. This is when the first bombs will definitely drop pending either trigger-based targets. 1536, F-18 second strike starts. Also, first sea-based Tomahawks launched. More to follow per timeline. We're currently clean on OPSEC, that's operational security. So, now that we know a lot more about these messages, and it seems that Goldberg called their bluff in a way, we got to talk about the potential legal and political ramifications here. I mean, you have Ratcliffe and Tulsi Gabbard basically saying one thing under oath, and then we have all these apparent messages. That is an issue. So aside from any discussion about allegedly testifying falsely, here's another problem. You remember when Hillary Clinton came under fire for her use of a private email server as Secretary of State, and even though James Comey determined there was no criminal intent for potential charges, you gotta wonder whether the same legal reasoning to challenge that decision could be applied here. That it's not so much a reporter was seemingly mistakenly added to a group chat, but maybe the more important issue is that the app they were all apparently using made this possible in the first place. Similar to a private server, maybe not the most secure platform to communicate or hold sensitive material, and especially conversations about a sensitive operation like this. And that is the intent, the willing use of Signal, which, although Ratcliffe has indicated is permissible to be used for work conversations, as reported by outlets like Fox News and NPR, you have this Department of Defense memo from 2023 that Signal cannot be used to access, transmit, process non-public DoD information. Or how about this? It was determined in an internal report that the use of Signal by a former Pentagon official back in 2021 violated the department's policies because it is not an authorized messaging service. So when you look at a pertinent section of the Espionage Act, the section that talks about mishandling information, it reads, in part, whoever being entrusted with or having lawful possession or control of any document or plan or information relating to the national defense through gross negligence, so not even intent, gross negligence, permits the same to be removed from its proper place of custody or delivered to anyone in violation of his trust. That is how you get in violation of that. And that's what makes this arguably more than just a mistake. You should have known the dangers of using this technology in this app. You used it to transmit this information and used an app that made it capable for a reporter to be added. So hey, do you go with the Hillary Clinton defense? Maybe you should. Maybe you should. Maybe you should, considering it's quite rich. The people on this Signal group chat were quite critical in the past of Hillary Clinton and the private email server. Marco Rubio, Fox News, 2016, apparently saying nobody's above the law, not even Hillary Clinton, even though she thinks she is. In a November 2016 Fox News appearance, Pete Hegseth called Clinton's use of the email server criminal, saying, quote, people have gone to jail for 1/100th of what, even 1/1000th of what Hillary Clinton did. Waltz, who again seemingly invited the Atlantic journalist onto the group chat, again, mistakenly, tweeted in June of 2023, Biden's sitting National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan sent top secret messages to Hillary Clinton's private account. And what did DOJ do? And what did DOJ do about it? Not a damn thing. Okay, so putting all that to the side, putting all the legal stuff to the side, let's talk about some fun stuff, okay? So the media coverage of this whole thing, after all, this is the spin room. And there has been a whole lot of spin on this, starting with this valiant attempt from Fox News host Will Cain to actually try to turn this leak into what appears to be a badge of honor for the White House.
It's an insight, a transparent insight into the thought process and dialogue of our national leaders. If you look at the actual content of what was reported, if you look at how they discuss potential strikes on Houthis in Yemen, what you will see is dialogue between Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, Stephen Miller, Tulsi Gabbard, and many more in a very collaborative, open, honest, team-based attempt to come to the right decision after years of secrecy and incompetence. If you read the content of these messages, I think you'll come away proud that these are the leaders.
All right, look, he has a point. He has a point in the sense that, yeah, no one's questioning at this point the actual operation and the communications. I mean, some of them may be a little questionable, but yeah, no one's questioning that aspect of it. But feels like a stretch, right? Doesn't it feel a little bit like a tough sell on this one? That's what we're focusing on. The American people weren't supposed to see this conversation. So, I don't know, I'm proud of their texting skills. I think it is pretty fair to say that your average iPhone-obsessed 15-year-old has got Mike Waltz beat on texting proficiency, to say the least. The problem is, of course, shouldn't have been on this platform, and why was a reporter added? That's the crux, the meat of this story. Now, Fox's Jesse Waters went a different route, and this was his attempt to defend the Trump administration.
Did you ever try to start a group text? You're adding people and you accidentally add the wrong person?
Not for a military strike.
Mary knows all your raunchy plans for the bachelor party. Well, that kind of happened today with the Trump administration. Mike Waltz was...
What is it shouldn't happen?
...on Signal, an encrypted app, with the Secretary of Defense, the VP, and a bunch of other national security officials to collaborate on whether to...
If it was so secure, it shouldn't have had the ability to add a stranger.
Well, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz accidentally added a reporter to the group text. and not a good reporter. Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic, one of the biggest hoax artists around. Well, he heard some things he probably shouldn't have, but could have been a wee bit of a security breach.
A wee bit of a security breach? What is this, Arrested Development? This is light treason? Anybody who watched that show will get that reference. But anyway, not really any such thing, is there? Just light breach, small breach. Now, without brushing aside the seriousness of the national security concerns at play, I mean, you are talking about active U.S. troops whose lives in a worst-case scenario could have been put at danger. Well, that's very clear. But the bad text part of this story, it's actually kind of funny. I mean, here's Fox News father and son team Steve and Peter Doocy, who seemed to find the humor in all this Tuesday on Fox and Friends.
Trump team accidentally added lefty editor to secret text group planning Yemeni raids. What are people saying? Do you have any scoop today?
Well, they did promise to be the most transparent White House ever, right? I guess adding a journalist to a group chat like that would be consistent with that promise.
But I don't think that's what they meant.
No, I don't think that's what they meant either. But that was, I like that actually. So look, you know, promises made, promises kept. You would expect that some of Fox's biggest Trump defenders to go to bat for the White House here, right? Now, it's not really a surprise. But I want to give credit to Fox anchors John Roberts and Bill Hemmer for not sugarcoating this gaffe in the report shortly after it broke.
It's just the idea that you accidentally invite into the group the editor-in-chief of a magazine that's not particularly kind to the Trump administration. National security was compromised from the standpoint that you did invite an outsider who doesn't have top secret security clearance into the group, but nothing else untoward happened. But I'll tell you, this would count as a BFD, according to people that I've talked to, and it will likely be looked into quite thoroughly.
It's what we call a misfire, and if you could take it back, you would.
Roberts is right. This is clearly a BFD. Now, the question is, how long will it be a BFD? Well, I'll tell you what, if the left-leaning outlets have their way, this story isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Some of the hype that we have seen on CNN and MSNBC has been, to borrow the phrase from Jesse Waters, a wee bit over the top, like this from former Obama official Susan Rice on MSNBC Tuesday.
It's stunning. It's likely the biggest national security debacle that any professional can remember.
Really? Really? I feel like if we rack our brains, we can think of a few national security failures that top some leaked text messages. Then you have former MSNBC host Tiffany Cross, also amped up the panic meter to an 11 during an appearance on CNN Monday night.
This is so utterly ridiculous. It's not only a national embarrassment, this is a national emergency.
National emergency? National emergency? This is so similar to how Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell posted on X, their idiocy just put a giant target on America. We are not safe. Feels a little extreme. No, I don't think we're quite at that level yet, but that is what you're hearing on more left-leaning programs or networks or things like that. And they love this story, right? They're going to try to keep the attention on it as long as possible. I think that's a fair assessment. Whereas, by the way, Fox is going to look for any excuse at all not to cover it. And then you got Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who, by the way, may have given Fox one with this cheap shot against Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott, who, by the way, is paralyzed. He's in a wheelchair.
We in these hot Texas streets, honey. Y'all know we got Governor Hot Wheels down there. Come on now. And the only thing hot about him is that he is a hot mess, honey.
That is so ugly. That is really, really nasty. He's in a wheelchair. That's the level you're going to right now? Now, I said a distraction for Fox News. Oh, they made sure to show that. They made sure to show it every single hour on Tuesday from noon on. Now, politically, that is a really big unforced error there, throwing the White House a lifeline at a moment where it needed one. But let me just go back to Will Cain for a second, back on Fox News. And this is not to just pick on Will Cain, because I actually think he's quite the talent. I think he's really, really good on TV. But we played you his spin on this earlier, right? And before we wrap up, I want to play you Will Cain's stunning interview with Democratic Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut, where the Fox News host got called out for seemingly trying to downplay this story.
I'm not going to listen to you tell me that this is about a partisan advantage. It is a mistake, and yes, it's a very serious mistake, because if you make a mistake in Social Security and grandma doesn't get a phone call through, that's bad. But there is not zero risk that our young men and women in uniform, the ones who flew those F-35s and F-18s,
Congressman, how was an American life put into jeopardy?
We will find
Congressman,
out.
how?
Because
Fine, you've made a claim. Tell me how an American life was put into jeopardy.
Because in an insecure channel, in what was acknowledged as a mistake before, whether it was a day or 2 hours or 5 hours, in a signal chat that we know. Do you want an answer to your question? In a signal chat that we know that the Russians could intercept, they might have told the Houthis in an hour. And
it's a good back and forth right there.
Anti-aircraft stuff around. It is by the
It's actually a good conversation.
Dead pilots or sunken ships right now. And I will tell you, whether it's a big mistake or a small mistake, to then go and attack Jeffrey Goldberg, without whom we wouldn't even know about this mistake, it's got to make
including Jeffrey Goldberg was the mistake. Including Jeffrey Goldberg was the mistake.
And get any military officer on your show right now, Will. Get any military officer serving right now, any intelligence officer, and they will tell you that Jeffrey Goldberg was the cherry on top of using an insecure channel in advance to discuss military plans.
I'm not going to argue, Congressman. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to argue that no mistake was made. And I'm not going to argue that Signal is the perfectly appropriate app to have this conversation. What I am going to argue with you is that you are hyperbolically taking this over the top, yes, absolutely, for partisan points, in order to score in the first time in 2 months. Don't do it on Signal. I agree. Don't do it on Signal.
Well,
but nobody's life.
You know what? Here's the
CIA
thing.
director.
You are the one who is making this into a partisan issue. And we are talking about the lives of our young men and women. And it makes me want to throw up to hear you turn this into a partisan issue when we are talking about the lives of our airmen and Marines.
It's being made into a partisan issue on both sides.
Cheering Medal of Honor winners, many of whom win posthumously, and
you know what I could run a segment on,
this
Congressman?
mistake is about partisan advantage.
It is. And I can run that segment, and I'm doing it with you right now, and I'll tell you something else. This isn't an administration that watched as 13 Marines died or spilled secrets to the Chinese Communist Party or did any of the other things that we just watched. It's hard to take you seriously, or that Jeffrey Goldberg is the hero in this story, when what you're positing is a hypothetical, and a hypothetical that will be rectified.
Just a stunning moment of television right there. I think that was an important conversation to have right there, okay? You might agree, disagree with either side, but an important conversation. I'm glad that they had it. Now, look, is there going to be an investigation, potential criminal charges? Unlikely, in my opinion, under this DOJ, and even not 100% sure they would have a case. Impeachment, it's a bit trickier. Is this embarrassing? I think so. I think that's a fair argument, especially after all the talk about Trump's picks for cabinet secretaries who were criticized for not having experience or expertise to be in those jobs. Now you got this, not what the administration needed, let me tell you. That is all we have for you right now here on The Spin Room. I am Jesse Weber. I'll catch you next time.